first speaker of Session 3 is Honorary Chairman Karl Hahn of Volkswagen. Honorary Chairman of Volkswagen, Karl Hahn, is also a member of a Supervisory Committee to Volkswagen and Honorary Chairman of Audi, Seat, and Skoda. He also served as a Senior Advisor to the General Capital Group in Munich and CH Partners. He is also a Professor of Industry Corporate Strategy at the University of Saxony in Germany. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Honorary Chairman Karl Hahn to the stage for his speech on the car industry in the future. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome with a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am most happy and most honored to be here with you at this occasion to celebrate the 50th anniversary of your fantastic economic newspaper. And besides, I must say, I have been benefiting enormously to have attended yesterday's session, which belongs to one of the best, I think, I have ever attended of the type of forums and economic and political as well as financial exchanges of ideas. So consequently, I feel very honored to address you today. You have selected a European. This symbolizes our new world and businessmen's global reach and philosophy. 10 years have passed since I last came to Seoul on occasion of a meeting of the Trilateral Commission. Meanwhile, your country has continued to advance at supersonic speed and entered the top league. Back in the 80s, we at Volkswagen had contacts with Korean automobile manufacturers exploring joint ventures. The political changes in Europe at the time, and most of all, the importance we allocated to the People's Republic of China, induced us to realign our priorities. It was these geopolitical earthquakes which opened unparalleled opportunities for the world, and particularly for Korea as well as for Germany. Along this, the free flow of information, knowledge, capital, goods, services has accelerated at an unprecedented rate. To talk about my company a little bit, in 1945, Volkswagen had to be rebuilt out of the ashes and trauma of World War II with a vehicle design, the quite famous Beetle, classified by British automobile experts as completely useless, only fit to be handed back to the Germans. I must say, ever since I have had a very suspicious attitude being told anything by experts. At that time, the British automobile industry was Europe's leader, but soon it completely disappeared from the scene, with one exception, however. Nobody can win today a Formula One race without a British engineering team, which gives a lot of food for thought. The Beetle became a symbol of Germany's economic miracle after World War II and one of its best ambassadors. But our success was based only on this legendary car, which we had not even designed ourselves, and therefore on a very risky monoculture. Nevertheless, after an extremely bumpy, risky ride, we finally came to a full-line product program, vehicle product program, creating another miracle car, the Golf, and quite a few other pace setters. Eventually, in 1980, and this was a very important move for us, we formed a very unique European multi-brand group and gained the #1 position in Europe, coming from 5th place in Europe, with brands like Volkswagen, Audi, Seat, Skoda, followed in the 90s by Bentley, Lamborghini, Bugatti, and finally now by Porsche and Scania Trucks, and we have also a majority shareholding in MAN Trucks. We are also once again working hand in glove with Suzuki, and this offers complementary strengths in products, markets, technology, perfecting our collection, so to speak, of passenger cars. In May this year, the Italian design firm of my friend Giorgetto Giugiaro, who has been very active, as can be seen on the street of Korea, was acquired by Volkswagen. Giugiaro had designed the Volkswagen first Golf hatchback in 1974 and many other icons of the automobile industry. This deal will certainly strengthen the quantity and excellence of the VW Group's firepower for product battles of tomorrow. By emphasizing engineering and design, we have created value for our customers. Our multi-brand strategy enabled us in turn to develop to perfection a unique platform module strategy. The sum of these strategies has permitted us to develop financial solidity, global reach, and presence in all important segments of the marketplace, advancing eventually to the #3 position among the automobile manufacturers of the world today. The Korean automobile industry has also rapidly moved to the very top of our business. Hyundai moved up 8 places in less than a decade to the #5 position in the world, becoming one of the fastest growing automobile companies. As you see, I'm discarding a lot of the most beautiful part of my speech, but these were more philosophical remarks, which I think we have not the time to indulge in this morning. I have been invited to give you my thoughts about the fundamental changes in our automobile industry. First of all, I should state that I do not speak as a VW representative, but as a purely private citizen. But the automobile has been my life for more than half a century. It has been the dream of people all over the world, eliminating frontiers, giving them the freedom of mobility. The automobile industry has been one of the key drivers of technology, mass production, globalization, helping to reduce poverty globally and in unheard of dimensions. Let me see that I move this here forward. One of the things should work. Next, here we are. After this introduction, please let me concentrate on this session on the substantial impact in our industry. Following this, we shall examine the shift of center of gravity in both production and demand in Asia, reinforced by demographics. Finally, I shall speak about the greatest technological as well as financial challenge our industry has ever had to cope with since its very beginnings, namely the revolutionary move to automobiles with all the repercussions this entails. Our chart clearly reflects the very significant economic slowdown in the classic markets in 2009, which is in marked contrast to the newly industrialized BRIC and Tiger countries. With the exception of Russia, they remained particularly unscathed by the recent recession. China, India, and Brazil are already back at GDP growth rates between 5 and 10%. While traditional automobile markets between 2007 and 2009 suffered a severe slump, sales in the US and Japan were at their lowest level since 1982 and 1977 respectively. Asian markets, namely China, India, and the Republic of Korea, as well as South American Mercosur, were recording strong increases. In 2009, vehicle sales volume in the BRIC countries exceeded the 20 million mark for the first time. In the meantime, the recovery of the global automobile market has gathered momentum. Again, primarily fueled by expanding demand in Asia and Brazil, but also the US. The worst of the crisis seems to have been overcome thanks, among other factors, as we heard yesterday also from Martin Feldstein, to comprehensive government incentives and scrapping programs in the mature markets, but most of all in China, today's locomotive. But does this recovery mean that we are returning to business as usual? The comparison between vehicle sales by manufacturers during the recession reveals an automotive landscape that is, to say it mildly, very dramatically changed. Roughly, Asia gained 1.5 million passengers during the recession, passenger cars, while the US producers, including Toyota USA, lost 4 million vehicles within 1 year. This clearly underlines market no respect. So 2009 saw the closing chapter of the dominance of the American automobile industry. Its domestic market has progressively shifted into the hands of foreign automobile manufacturers from Japan, Korea, and Germany. After learning the lessons of lean manufacturing too late, shareholder value thinking gave the rest to our American competitors. This philosophy dominated the boardrooms and eventually perverted entrepreneurial strategies not only for the American car industry, which had brought mass production to the world. Instead of creating value, it destroyed jobs and shareholder value. Looking at the world automobile industry sales ranking by manufacturer in 2009, it is no surprise that the picture reflects what we just saw in stunning proportions, being reminded also to what we saw in steel and computer hardware industries and quite a few other industries. Adding Suzuki to Volkswagen, these two were already leading the pack. For the first time, we see two Chinese groups among the world's 16 largest automobile companies, Changan and SAIC. The ranking of production countries, likewise, naturally, reflects the recession year 2009. We see Japan losing its #1 position to China, way ahead of all predictions. We see Japan losing to China. By 2009, China had also become the largest automobile market in the world, and I bet it will remain so for the rest of this century until India overtakes them. The USA remains the #3, while we see Germany and Korea in 4th and 5th places. Brazil had already achieved 6th place and India 7th, coming from 9. Germany will most likely be overtaken by Brazil already in 2010. That again demonstrates the dynamics of the BRIC nations. The financial crisis and the subsequent recession accelerated trends which had started way before 2009. Almost 40 years ago, as you can see here, Asia and Brazil produced just 30% of all motor vehicles. By 2009, they had more than doubled their world share, reaching 65%. Western Europe and North America, we saw similar statistics yesterday, combined have to be content with a little more than 1/3 today, down from more than 70% in 1970, when world automobile production was at 30 million, total production, 30 million vehicles, compared to the recession year of 2009 of 60 million, and a global capacity at this time which is estimated at about 90 million units. We see not only a doubling in production, but also, of course, much more sophisticated, perfect automobiles. It is clear that enormous changes already lie behind us, but the truly fundamental ones are still to come. The demographic shift in center of gravity towards Asia is accentuating them. And I must make also the remark, the most reliable forecast figures you can have are demographic figures, as they are the most difficult to change or to make major mistakes. The demographic shift in center of gravity towards Asia is accentuating them. Mankind's population will multiply, eventually reaching more than 9 billion by 2050, with in excess of 5 billion in your continent. This compares to a total global population of not even 2 billion when I was born. But the changes is even more dramatic than meets the eye. Take note of Japan or those European countries which stopped breeding. Your countries is even leading this unfortunate trend. For the same reason, Russia's population will be down to the population of the Yemen by the middle of this century. At the same time, 70 million young Chinese men will have no chance to find a spouse, while China will have to cope with a rapidly aging population, a grave political challenge for this country. Much more than the demographic growth, the density of cars by country shows us an unlimited growth potential among the BRIC countries, driving their automobile ownership towards completely unheard of dimensions. Let us look at car ownership in China today, with 19 vehicles per 1,000 people. This number is 2 years old. It's probably today above 20, certainly above 20. Assuming that China's domestic market will eventually reach the car ownership penetration of your country, of Korea in 2008, that was 254 automobiles per 1,000 inhabitants. This alone will require a Chinese domestic production capacity of approximately 30 million cars per annum, which was advertised yesterday for the year 2020, probably a little bit optimistic, but let us wait and see. This would be 50% of today's world market, and with a time lag of, say, 10 years, that statistic probably will apply more and more to India as well, now at 7 vehicles per thousand only, 1/3 of China. And this all you have to multiply by 1.3 or 1.56 billion people. Whatever it might be, one element seems to me for certain. Without a Chinese-Indian production base, nobody can stay competitive in terms of manufacturing cost, together with its supplier industry, or in terms of competitive speed and unit costs for its R&D. In addition, we should not forget the support of Chinese steel and other industries, from aluminum to electronic components to batteries. To be among the automobile manufacturers by 2030, a company will have to have the capital resources to fuel for the investment race. As a prerequisite, it will need sworn-in international qualified associates to spend it in a wise and timely manner, mostly in BRIC countries. Already this year, IBM has transferred its central purchasing division from the United States to China. This is indeed food for thought. India has also entered this new automobile age with a big bang. The $2,500 or $3,000 nano car set a new benchmark by a country which wasn't known for automobile design or production. US $300 computers, $30 phones show that the hotbed of business innovation is to be found in so-called emerging markets. This has already created a level playing field, ending for good any type of privileges from past centuries. 70% of the world's growth over the next years will come from emerging markets, with 40% of it from China and India alone. Due to the speed of GDP growth of the Chinese economy, structural changes are accelerating, further invigorating not only Asian neighbors, but virtually the rest of the world. This even applies to countries in Africa and especially South America. China excels also in its global energy and raw materials, as well as agro strategies. The consequences of the strategies managed by the Chinese government are exemplary. To an increasing extent, they will specifically reflected by the global automobile markets as well. By 2018, China's share of the world car market will reach 18%, coming from 9% in 2007. Center of gravity is consequently shifting towards Asia. Mind you, the two statistics look very similar, but they have completely different ratios. In the top statistic, it ends up with 12 trillions, and the bottom statistic with 50 trillions. After having looked for 40 years of the automobile industry's development, let us now look forward to the next 40 years, to 2050, and examine the estimated change in GDP ranking. The writing has been on the wall with regard to consequences of these changes for some time now. By 2050, China, the US, and India will be the three most important countries by GDP. Back in 2003, the first 6 economic powers were the United States, Japan, Germany, the UK, France, and China. By 2050, the first European country will be Russia, in position number 6, but only thanks to its natural resources. The US will occupy an impressive number 2 position. India, number 3, will be followed by Japan and Brazil, the UK in number 2, Germany in 8th place, France and Italy in 9th and 10th. We heard yesterday Korea by 2040, however, would be in place 23. I think this is a little too pessimistic. They are camouflaging their success. Mind you, being number 1 in 2003 meant a GDP of 11 trillion, whereas in 2050 it will be 45 trillion GDP, 4 times as much. I am tempted to have a look at what we did, as it is quite instructive in the People's Republic of China. Please forgive me, but I cannot resist telling you what we did. As far back as the late 1970s, we were contacted by the Chinese government. When I returned to Volkswagen in 1982, after 9 years in emigration, in other words, I was fired, we restarted our contacts, updated our plans, and became the first Western automobile company to work in China hand in hand with the government, which considered this as one of their key political, economic, long-term investments. In 1985, we began with an annual car assembly of 1,700 Volkswagen Santanas after we had tested a 500 batch assembly of Santanas in Shanghai. In our first year, we attained, with these 1,700 cars, a market penetration of 23.7%, which indicates the size of the total market. From then on, and with national content very quickly going to 70 and 90%, we enjoyed a market share of better than 50% over more than a decade and a half, courtesy our competitors. They did not trust Chinese politics, in sharp contrast to us. You can see here also, of course, that we lost a lot of market share, a little more than necessary, as we were a little late in catching up with new products in China. Nevertheless, we maintain our number 1 position and increase it, and the absolute numbers are, of course, not so bad, but they could be much better. As a foreign automobile manufacturer, we remained virtually alone with SAIC as a partner for the Volkswagen division, and with a second joint venture for mainly Audi with FAW. Not only did we lay down the modern infrastructure of Chinese automobile supply industries with our suppliers from Europe and the United States, but we indirectly trained management for our competitors as well, as along with craftsmen in our apprentice schools. We even went to the point that we influenced the Chinese commercial legislation, or we translated the German patent law for the Chinese patent law. Very recently, the VW Group announced an investment program in China of $7.5 billion, totally financed out of cash flow, increasing capacity to 3 million cars. It has been our habit in China to invest out of cash flow. Our business in the People's Republic has been profitable from day one. That is what you call the advantage of a first mover. But this is not guaranteed. In parallel, our Chinese partners benefited financially enormously from our success and gained, besides, know-how at the same time, free of charge, building very important automobile groups. Operating today in China in whatever industry, as you know, means working in one of the most competitive markets in the world. But at first sight, all my comments look positive and promising, but they have not been helpful in the past for many competitors in our industry. In moving into new, unheard of dimensions, uncharted waters, the world has outgrown its closest personnel strategies, exhausted its environment, and more, its resources. Our national political systems seem to have been left even further behind by globalization and technological progress than our corporate structures. As a side remark, those who have caused in these days the environmental problem the most suffer under it the least, and vice versa. We are in the middle of a very asymmetric development. We have to realize that our 124-year-old combustion engine-based automobile, never more and faster perfected than right now, will eventually run out of fuel, but not ideas. Besides, sheer environmental consequences would not permit a doubling of the world's automobile fleet from the present 850 million. Climate change, energy constraints, and unavoidably tighter emission controls around the globe are boosting the search for alternative energy sources and innovative drivetrains to power the vehicle of the future. Simultaneously, with all the developments discussed above, another phenomenon is changing the environment for the motor car. Since 2008, for the first time, more than half of the world's population has been living in urban agglomerations. And this trend will progress rapidly. In 1950, a full 70% of our fellow human beings will be urbanized. What do I tell these Koreans? You are urbanized to a degree of 80%, as you all know. A great number of new megacities will come into being, while megacities of today will turn into meta-cities. This shift in population from rural to predominantly urban, concentrated most of all in Asia and Africa, is having an impact on many aspects of life. Amongst other things, it will increase the pressure on infrastructure and, in parallel, create new mobility needs with corresponding products. In addition, it will further boost the already strong trend towards smaller cars. The described trends have brought electromobility into focus. It's a technology that is especially important for agglomeration areas and ideal for commuters. All over the world, national, local governments have started ambitious programs to promote the development of electric cars, which are not yet widely available. I have a picture here showing you a historic electric car with hub motors, the electric motors in the wheels, 4 of them, a 4-wheel drive vehicle, as you will see on my next slide. The Lohner Porsche was pioneered by Ferdinand Porsche for the World's Fair held in Paris in 1900. His grandson, Ferdinand Piëch, is today the chairman of the Volkswagen Group, which will not surprise you. The platform of this car is fundamentally different from one powered by an internal combustion engine. Everything mechanically and hydraulically today connected to today's most complex drivetrain is absent, including a sophisticated, for instance, automatic transmission with 8 speeds or more. That saves space and weight likewise. The electric motor in this case are mounted in the wheel hubs, as I mentioned, delivering power independently and directly to each wheel. This gives high flexibility to the design. It might interest you that this concept of the Lohner Porsche also served as a basis for the moon buggy driven by the US astronauts. But we, of course, have now been trying to modernize this car to make it a little more aerodynamic, to bring the center of gravity a little bit down, to update this automobile. Theoretically, the electric drive, however, is a means of transport with zero emission from the car, capable of achieving the equivalent of, say, 200 miles per gallon. The Audi electric car, e-tron, to be seen on this slide, is a half-brother of the aforementioned Porsche, powered by 4 electric motors that are mounted on the front and rear axles close to the wheels, making it also a true quattro. But the new technology still has a decisive problem unresolved. We are still awaiting a suitable battery for mass production, for powering the electric motor and all the other devices and equipment in our cars, as we want also to have in Siberia heating and in most of the countries cooling. Today its price is prohibitive. Its energy density of the battery stands at about 2.5 to 3 to 4% of hydrocarbon fuel equivalent. In order to reach the mass market, a great deal of challenges still have to be overcome, from power storage and recharging, time to weight, volume cost, and last but not least, complex safety problems as you are traveling with a car with a 400-volt system, which can and should not serve as an execution chair. Unless there is a major breakthrough in battery technology, the number of electric cars on the road will continue to be limited. Nevertheless, we can already talk about a couple of million cars by tomorrow, thanks to subsidies, however, and hybridization, the first step towards powertrain electrification. The e-car is not a product variant, rather it heralds a fundamental and urgent system change for the automotive industry and one of crucial importance for our environment. The car on the right looks very similar to a conventional car, but in the next intermediate period, of course, when the battery cost issue is limiting the total capacity for electric drive automobiles, you have to bring into a chassis all sorts of drivetrains in order to be flexible and economic, and you can imagine what this means to our engineer. The entry into e-mobility has fired the starting pistol in the race for this drive technology of the future. Whoever produces mass market capable electric vehicles will achieve a major boost for their image, but will not necessarily win the marathon. A gigantic engineering effort is underway to find among the great deal of alternatives, millions of alternatives, the optimum electric motor, for instance. A wide field of research is going on in powertrain electronics, still in their infancy. Finally, we need production equipment for the manufacture of, say, batteries. This you will find in the US or Japan and more in China as well. Fuel cells, to complicate matters even more, have a potential as range extender for batteries at zero CO2, in contrast to combustion engines offered today for the same purpose. Until the battery issue will be finally resolved, all imaginable intermediate engine drive solutions will try to find their markets. As a consequence, a group of competitors will grow, after all, in contrast to the situation with the internal combustion engine with its high market entry barriers, in contrast with the high entry barriers due to the enormous know-how base of the European and Japanese OEMs, the new technology holds out the prospect for new entrants from the electrical, electronic, chemical, battery, and other fields to enter this race. The electric drive, as a disruptive technology, will eventually transform the DNA of the motor car and our industry as a whole. It is a new deck of cards. The pressure faced by traditional manufacturers is tremendous. On the one hand, they must not neglect the ongoing development of conventional drive systems. Indeed, they must push ahead further. On the other hand, they are called on to invest billions in research and development of new drive technologies. Cross-industry alliances with battery and electrical companies are now on the agenda. China has responded to this situation with aggressively developing an electric car strategy. This approach is not aimed to catch up with the internal combustion engine, which would be a hopeless objective, but to leapfrog its competitors of the classic automobile industry of the world. This is a strategy plan, a masterpiece by the Minister of Science, Mr. Wang Gang. 20 years ago, he worked as an engineer at Audi in Germany, and let me tell you, we are very proud of our former associate. As one of the leading consumer good producers, China is taking advantage of its strong battery position, which forms a prerequisite for this strategy. At the same time, China can benefit from its lithium and the leading rare earth deposits of neodymium, key elements for the battery, the one, and the permanent magnetic steel for certain types of high-performance electric motors on the other side. The transition to e-mobility will, however, not happen overnight, as you can imagine. Over the next 10 years, electric car of all types will only attain something like 10% of the total automobile production due to the aforementioned technical restrictions. After 2030, e-mobility will progressively gain market share as scientists, I guess, have never failed to solve problems, especially if the entire world concentrates on such a high degree and with such enormous means on this challenge. Beginning with 2030, production capacities directed towards internal combustion engines will have to be scrapped step by step, just after they have had to be increased dramatically in and for the BRIC countries. I believe, however, that the internal combustion engine will still hold on to half of the market to 2050 and even belong, as I will explain a little further. Unfortunately, therefore, there is another reason for not being completely carried away too soon, shown in this statistic. As long as most countries continue to produce more than 50% of their electricity from coal or gas-fired power stations, China stands currently at 70%. We have the necessary time for transition without wasting either resources or overburdening the environment, thanks to the striking progress made with the internal combustion engine. To give you an example, while high-pressure direct injection diesel pumps function today at 2,000 atmospheres, 2,500 are already in the making, with fuel reduction of another 40% for diesel engines, hand in hand with substantial power output. 100 horsepower plus for a 1-liter engine is already yesterday's news. In total, and not by a political count, today's diesel and also gasoline-powered cars already promise to be more fuel and CO2 efficient than an electric car charged with CO2 electricity. This, of course, does not apply in countries like Switzerland, France, or even mention Iceland, thanks to their nuclear, hydro, or geothermal power or renewable energies. A compact class electric car consuming 60 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometer will produce about 90 grams of CO2 per kilometer with the present mix of electricity generation in the European Union. In contrast, we would average about 180 grams per kilometer if charging our electric car from a Chinese grid. In diesel and gasoline engines rolling off the assembly lines today, we are below 100 grams per CO2 per kilometer, which is quite encouraging. It will consequently require dramatic investments in power generation, hopefully of the right mix, in order to satisfy an exploding world energy demand and to reduce global CO2 emissions not only on paper. Thank you very much.